Good morning, good afternoon. This is the Experts About Nothing podcast, and this is our voting. This is our voting special. You guys got just me and Brent. We have some things we want to talk to you about. Brent is going to lead the way, so I'll turn it over to him. Uh, but we thank y'all for joining us. As you see in the background, we have 16 days and 7 hours and some odd minutes before it is election day. And we just want to talk to y'all about some things that maybe you heard, maybe you haven't heard. So I'm gonna give you some detail about what should be visible in these streets. So Brent, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. And folks, I will preface this, and I call it a prosecution of sorts. This laying out of facts is something different. We normally try to walk kind of the middle road. Sometimes Wes is like bump the middle road, I want to just say, but today we're going to probably give you a little bit of a who we're voting for. We're going to give basically an endorsement. Um, you know, this election cycle, and they say it every election, every general election cycle, but this one definitely feels like this is a big one. If we don't do the right things here as a people, there could be repercussions far greater than probably we even realize at this moment. And so we wanted to kind of lay out some of the arguments that are being made, some of the key points that people are bringing up as that are hot topic issues, and give you facts. It's easy to say something, it's easy to make a statement, but we want to have facts behind those statements. And these are all facts where you can see the sites where we got them from. You can go back and read it for yourself. A simple Google search with simple keywords will take you right to where we got it, and you can do a deeper dive. But we definitely want to educate you guys and kind of show why it is we landed where we landed. So we will get rolling here. So I'll start with the first one. This is a big, big, big one here for a lot of folks, and that is abortion. And if you watch our show regularly, we talked about on the show quite a bit that abortion rates have consistently, even before the reversal of Roe v. Wade or the overturning, have been on a downward trend for quite some time. So up on the screen now, for those of you that are watching, is an infographic that came from Pew Data. So this is their research, and they looked at the numbers of legal abortions in the United States of America since the 1970s. Abortion rates by all metrics, and both represented here, at least in this infographic, peaked at about 1990. So that was 34 years ago. Okay, since that point in time, the abortion rates in this country, even prior to the reversal of Roe v. Wade, were on a downward trend. So the notion that abortion and women's abilities to make decisions about their own body and their own autonomy, women have been doing that obviously in the last 34 years, and they've been making educated and informed decisions, and abortions have actually decreased during that time period. So one of the things that the Republican Party likes to bring out is that abortions were killing innocent children. Abortion is bad. And whatever your political or ideological beliefs on abortion are, the numbers back up that they are and were prior to the overturning of Roe v. Wade decreasing because of the additional attachments to abortion help. Because when you go to family planning or to these centers, they were giving you education about adoption. They're giving you education about all of the options, safe sex to protect you not only against obviously pregnancy, but also sexually transmitted diseases. So educating the people was a big part of that. And because of the reversal of Roe v. Wade, a lot of that is going away. So I just wanted to put this up here because we do believe, that women deserve the right to choose for their own selves. That's a discussion between a woman and her doctor, and not the government. And that's sort of where I stand on it. Wes, what's your take on this topic here?
Well, Brent, you already know where I stand. I think a woman has a decision that she makes about what's going on with her, and like there is no reason why the government should be determining that. The option should be available. There's no reason why you're saying you can't do this. You're basically becoming the all determinant of what a person can do, and that doesn't make any sense. I mean, Brent, why do you think they want to be in these people's bedrooms and determining what they can and cannot do? Doesn't make sense to me, but I mean,
Well, if I had to hazard a guess, Wes, it is about control. it allows them to control people, and in particular, women. This is an
Yeah.
attack that, I mean, because let's face it, right? I mean, not saying that obviously abortion obviously it takes two to tango, so we know at some level that a gentleman is involved, but really the body that is at risk that's carrying the child is the young lady's body.
Yep.
The body that would experience any trauma, or any emotional, repercussions from having a procedure or not having procedure, giving birth to a child, all of those rest on the young lady. So it is a way in which mostly, I hate to say this, I know they're female Republicans, but it is a way where a mostly male majority political party can enforce and inflict their will on the opposite gender. And just so we're clear, in the last week, the former president of the United States said that, quote, malehood is under attack. There's some statements and some things that just are just so irritating. And when we have the truth and then the truth is turned into a lie, manhood is not under attack. If anything, manhood is safe and secure unless you are uncomfortable with women, right? Which is an absurd thing to think about. But if they view, and I'm just saying it this way because it's the only way I can rationalize it, if you view women not as humans, but as sexual objects to birth your kids and to keep the house, then you would want to quote unquote control them. And I don't agree with that. I think that every job function, every anything that requires skill, a woman can do just as equally as a man. The only thing that she's not able to do is what she scientifically cannot do, right? And vice versa with the same thing with the man. Other than that, we can all occupy the same roles, whether it's in leadership, whether it's in the medical field, whether it's in the home, out, wherever you are. There's nothing that prohibits us from learning new skills. And this notion that women are less than, and I know we're a little off on a tangent, but the notion that women are less than, I think this is a core issue because you're attacking physically, in a way, a woman's ability to control her own body.
And Brent, if the roles were reversed, and if it was men that were required to, well, had the ability to birth a child, there would be no Roe v. Wade because there would be no determining whether it was legal or not. It would just be, well, if you want to do it, have an abortion, you can have it.
Right.
But because it's them saying, hey, women, you can't do this, you have to have a law to say it or say that it's not, and reverse it, give it to the states, whatever he wants to say. But also at the same time, he comes out of his mouth and says that he's the protector of women. It is insane to me that somebody come out here and say that, but then also support and be proud that he reversed Roe v. Wade. It's insane to me. But
Yeah.
I'll turn it back over to you, Brent.
Well, yeah, I was just going to just piggyback off you. Um, Women don't. I'm going to say it this way: women don't need men as protectors. Women can protect themselves. What women need are good, decent men to stand there as allies, to stand in support of them. There may be times where we might have to step in and say, hey, hey, hey. But a lot of times women do the same for us. So this notion, and I heard him say that. I thought it was absurd because you're stripping them women of their rights.
Hmm.
But I think women need, and not in a romantic or sexual way, but just women need allies, partners, in life because they're already at a disadvantage. And if we elect a man that has no problem stripping them of their rights, uh, bodily autonomy was step one. There's nothing that says if he and his cronies don't have their way, that they won't reverse other things that impact women in a far greater way. And then, he crafts lies. He's the father of Ivy. You didn't even know what it was. Someone had to explain the nuances to you. You
Yeah.
didn't understand it. And so the notion that you are the father of it is just completely absurd. But yeah, I just, there's just something in me that just, and listen, I get it. Like there's some people that are going to listen to this, that'll watch it, and they're going to say, well, my religious views. This is not about that portion of it, because I will give you this, and you can take this whatever way you need to take it. If you are a Christian, and I'm going to just attack that because that's what I am. That's what, if you are a Christian and you read your Bible, You understand that we have freedom of choice. God did not, there are things that are sins, sure, but every human being that exists has been given a choice. God does not run roughshod over us. Certainly, He can pull strings if He chooses to do so to encourage the hearts and minds of people. But God has never removed the choice to do what He has deemed as sin or not sin. He leaves that choice to us. If that was the case, there would be no tree in the Garden of Eden because He would have eliminated the choice. Why give us the choice? So, what I would say to you is the elimination of choice is something that even the Almighty Creator did not remove from us. Now, you can say, well, we're enabling it. Okay. But there are a lot of things we don't enable that still become a personal choice to people. And people should be able within, to live their life, making their own choices and decisions. And I do believe that. Whether or not personally on an individual level, that doesn't matter because we're talking about the government. And a lot of times we lose that in the argument. We're thinking about, well, oh, I wouldn't, like, if you're a Christian, or I wouldn't support abortion, or I wouldn't tell some, right, but that's you individually. But what we're talking about with abortion as it stands as a policy is something that impacts people that you do not know, that you don't know the situation. And the fact that there are not these protections there in some states because the states have decided to go to this archaic form of measurement with it, you are removing that choice. So you are telling, even in your, oh, I wouldn't tell a person, you are encouraging women to be stripped of the ability to make a decision. And let's also be clear, historically, we know that abortions have been happening for centuries, if not millennia. The problem is abortion policy came into place because we wanted to provide a safe, legal way for women to make decisions about their body. Before there were obviously, backroom abortions and things, but those were not only obviously aborting the child, but also harming in great, horrific ways the mother. And let us also not forget that these abortion rules for people who are not looking for abortions, but also on the flip side, say you're in a situation where you're married. I'm married. I have a beautiful, lovely wife. If I lived in a state that had these archaic rules, and if her life was at risk, the physicians may not be able to perform the medical procedure necessary to save my wife's life. And feel whatever way you want to feel about it. For me in my house, I'm gonna use a biblical term at our Christians. For me in my house, my wife is my number one priority underneath Jesus. So her life, again, I would love to do something to save both lives, but her life is a life that I would choose to save. She and I have had this discussion, so it's not something where I just on a whim, just, oh, I'm going to enforce my will because I'm the man. We talked about it, and I was like, well, what would you like to do if we ever had this situation? And she told me her wishes on it, and so we aligned on that front. But it impacts people that aren't just trying to get out of a bad situation or trying to get away. Because I know sometimes we like to blame people and say, oh, well, they shouldn't be out there doing adult things if they don't want to have. Sometimes there are things that are happening that you are intentionally trying to have a child, but something goes wrong and you need these medical procedures. But because the government has interjected itself into this conversation, we are depriving people of that ability to save not only the life of their wife, but also future fertility. So there's a lot of pieces that move in that, and so I don't want it to be lost in that. Again, I'm not saying you're wrong if that's your belief system that you don't believe in it. That's certainly your personal preference, but I do believe there is a difference between what I prefer, what I believe, and what should be available to people in this country.
And mind you, this is affecting people right now. Like, you've heard the name Amber Thurman. I'm sure you have. The woman should be alive right now, and she's not because the physicians didn't feel comfortable because of the laws in the state of Georgia. So talk to me now. I mean, we can't be out here losing people because you want to enforce your will of these rules on women. It's insane. So now you're losing mother and baby out here. It's crazy. I don't understand. But Brand, let's move on to your next one.
I got you. All right. So one of the things, and the former president is on record of saying this so often, is that the Republican Party is the party of the rule of law. And he tells us that there is American carnage in the streets. Well, I know Wes laughed because he thought about the 34, felony convictions. We'll touch on that in a second. But Um, I wanted to pull up this infographic because this is important. This also comes from Pew Research Center. So again, you guys can fact check these. We are not making these numbers up. This chart measures the crime rates in the United States of America from 1993 to 2022. So it's a 29-year period. Okay. All right. If you look at this chart, now the former president has told you for not one, not two, but for three election cycles that it's American carnage in the streets. I'm here to tell you right now, the proof is in the pudding. Over the last 29 years, crime has decreased by every measurable statistic in this country. Now, listen, I'm not saying that crime doesn't exist. I'm not saying that we're not seeing things pop up on our television. What I do want to just kind of show an allusion to, or just kind of point to, the difference between 1993, and which on this chart here was the highest point of crime in the last 29 years. We live in a day and a time where we have social media. We have 24-hour news cycles. In 1993, after the late night local news went off, and Letterman and them went off, you might have got one or two infomercials, and then you got snow. They played the national anthem, and we got snow until the morning. So your TV was just static, and then about 6 o'clock, that thing come back to life. We now live in a point where there's news all the time. We have news in our hands, our phones, our devices, so we can get news pushed to us. So sometimes we're hearing about news stories that in a prior time we would not have been able to hear or to see. And so we feel as though the impression is as though there is this great influx of crime and criminality. But arguably, demonstratively, by the numbers here, we have far less crime today. This chart stops at 2022, but even still, the numbers continue to trend downwards. Today, we have far less crime than we had in 1993. Again, I'm not saying you don't see it, you don't hear it. Certainly, you do. But the actual occurrence in which it actually happens is far less, and is continuing to be on a downward trend. Obviously, there are small spikes in it. I mean, if you're looking at the chart, you may see small little bumps, but overall, the trajectory is a downward trend. But again, the former president uses this as a means to divide us against each other. If we tell the people there is violence in the street, they will be less likely to trust their fellow Americans. Now, listen, obviously, I got sense. I travel, so you got to keep your head on a swivel. I'm saying you don't trust every Joe Schmuck and every Sally Sue. I get that, okay? I get that. But what I am saying is, by and large, we live in a safe country. Do we have issues? Yes. But are those issues so great that there is American carnage in the streets? No. And the numbers back that up. So again, I think it's more prevalent because we see it, because it's reported to us in a way that comes directly to our hands. So even if we're not watching TV, we see it on social media. I mean, just go think, okay, back in the day in West, you probably know people that we used to have scanners, right? Well, scanners would just give you the reports of the police responding and whatnot. I mean, now we have whole pages dedicated where people are just sitting around monitoring scanners and reporting this and reporting that, and reporting this, reporting that. And while I do agree it is a great tool that could be used for good, that same tool could also be bent to skew things in an evil or in a manipulative way. And so I think it is important that we keep that in context, because again, the former president is telling you that crime is at an all-time high. He's actually blaming immigrants and other people. But on the whole, immigrant or not, crime is down in the United States of America and has been over the last, let's say, 30 years now.
And I think this brings us into your next.
It does. Point. Now, this is the most interesting piece, though. There is one area in which crime has increased. The reports of crime have increased in the United States. And this is even in a smaller window. So the chart that we have up here is just showing back to 2020. I did a little deep dive and even went back a little further than that, back to 2015. So last 10, well, we'll say 10 years, we're almost in 2025. So back to 2015. It is interesting to note, if you can see this chart, I know some of you aren't seeing it, so I'll explain it to you. Prior to 2020, so this is even during the first term of, and hopefully the only term of Donald J. Trump, we had hate crime in America. We know that. We've had that since there have been people, right? But it was more or less flat. It had some peaks and some valleys, but it was mostly flat. After the end of 2020, so after we knew that there would be a 46th president. It would not be a continuation of Donald Trump, at least at that moment. Hate crime in the United States of America skyrocketed. It almost doubled in quantity. And even today, though it is on a slight downward trajectory here over the last year or so, it is still elevated comparable to the same time frame prior to 2020. So if you go back to 2019, our rate today is still higher with hate crime than it was then. And you might say, well, what does that matter? You'd say, well, okay, that happened during the administration of Joe Biden. Well, that's only telling half the story. What happened in 2020 was you had an angry man who lost an election, and so all he could do was try to find ways to stay in the news. How do you do that? Well, you stir up violence, just like you stirred up violence, and you have the folks marching in Charlottesville, which is in our backyard, in our neighborhood. Just like you have the people that go to the Capitol building and attack the Capitol building. Now, I'm not saying it's a hate crime, but what I am saying is these are the same type of folks where they have decided that their American brothers and sisters are their enemy for whatever reason. And in a little bit, we're gonna come back to the bias that's built into this. But I just wanted to show you while we're talking about crime, the only crime that's really skyrocketed like that is hate crime, and it only did so after the 45th president lost his last election. When you see numbers like that, because again, it skyrocketed almost instantly on 2020. So this is before Joe took the oath of office in 2021. We can see the impact of and I'm gonna just say it this way, of the failure of leadership, okay, to corral people. Because at no point, and I would challenge anyone, anywhere, to find me 5 consecutive statements that President or former President, let me say former President Trump has ever said to cool the temperature down, to bring down the hate, to bring down. Where has he said, Proud Boys, I don't stand with you? He told them to stand by, stand down and stand by, not I disavow you. He doesn't tell the white supremacist David Duke, America is more important than just me and the white race. And ladies and gentlemen, don't get it twisted, just so you know, because I know some of you may see me and say, oh, this is just full disclosure for those of you who don't watch the show enough to know. My father was a white man. He passed away when I was 8 years old. I'm half white. This is not an attack on white society or our white citizens, because I believe that it takes all of us to succeed in this country. But that being said, aligning yourself with white supremacists, you are telling the world, you're telling your country, I don't believe in unity. That's how you get a statement like black jobs, because you don't believe in unity. And those type of statements increase others who perhaps, and I'm not saying, Donald Trump himself, I'm not saying he himself is violent. I've never seen him go out and smash a window and do these things, but he understands, or at least he should, if he's going to be a leader. Part of being a leader is understanding that what you do and the way you lead impacts others, whether it directly or indirectly. You must understand that there are people who are going to take your words and run with them. And your job is to try to get everybody back in line and say, hey, we got problems. But a good leader would say, but our fellow Americans are not our enemies. Black people are not your enemy. Asian Americans are not your enemy. Latinos and Hispanic folks are not your enemy. Indian people, South Asian people are not your enemy. Native Americans are not your enemy. Jewish people are not your enemy. Muslims and the folks that are part of the Islamic faith, they are not your enemy. We are one American family. But the former president, won't say that. He can't, because it would then show that the hate is wrong, and he uses hate and division to fuel his run. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to be tied to hate and division, because that is what he markets and what he peddles. He does not talk about unity. And very seldom does he talk about you and me and what we need. He doesn't talk about our safety. Every time that there was some sort of incident with police brutality, the president was nonplussed. He didn't have nothing to say about it. He didn't, because it didn't matter to him, because he doesn't care. But you and I, we live in diverse communities. We live where our neighbors don't necessarily look like us or pray to the same God that we do, have the same cultural beliefs that we do. So, for him, he doesn't care, because he's a billionaire and he has an estate at Mar-a-Lago he can go to, or Trump Tower in New York, and be isolated from us. You and I still have to go to the grocery store and buy groceries. So we still have to interact with our community. And so it is important to understand the hate that is being driven by the former president.
Yeah, it's kind of insane. I mean, you think about just what you mentioned earlier, and we're gonna get to like immigration in just a few. But like when he talks about the jobs that immigrants are taking, he always puts it to a race. They're taking the black jobs, they're taking the Hispanic jobs, but he never just says they're taking jobs because while it's inflammatory to even say that, it creates division when he puts a race on it. But the man is insane. But we'll continue to talk about why he is insane with the hate that he is putting out there. I guess I should say. But let's slide on. Let's talk about this economy, Brent.
Okay, so the economy. So I know a lot of times, and I hear it on the news a lot that with the polling, which polling is a whole other thing, and we may touch on this at a future date in a regular show about the interestingness of polling. But I will say this: they seem to paint this picture that because Donald Trump is allegedly a billionaire, and I say allegedly because he conned his way to becoming a billionaire again and hustled the people, but that's a topic for another day. We get the story that the economy is terrible. On the screen right now, for those of you who are watching, is a graphic that shows our GDP. So that's our gross domestic product. That is the measure at which a country produces items that sell and the value. So the higher your GDP, the more wealthy the nation is, then in general, the more healthy the economy is. And if you look at this chart, the GDP is on a huge, huge upswing. It is a continued momentum upward and to our right, which means that the economy is still growing and still increasing. It is interesting to note. Now, this shows the GDP and it goes all the way back to 1950. Okay, so this is decades of data. The only large blip that we see on this entire chart happened because of the pandemic. So if you look at 2020, there is a line there where the GDP took a hard hit. But ever since we started getting the recovery from the pandemic, for all now almost 4 years of Joe Biden's presidency, our GDP has recovered. And after the short blip, we were back to the previous level of GDP and have now since exceeded that for the last 3.5 years. So the former president tells you that the economy is so bad. And we're going to talk about inflation. I know some of you are yelling now, inflation. I'm going to show you some of the inflation is going to blow your mind. Again, this information that we're looking at comes from the Federal Reserve. So that's what Fred is. These numbers are not something that Wesley and I made up. This is showing the actual number of the gross domestic product from 1950 till to today. Okay. So let's put up the inflation because I'm sure they got questions about that.
You got it.
All right, and just so you guys know, the source for both of these charts at the bottom for the Federal Reserve is it comes from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. Okay, and then this one comes from the Department
The
of
World
Labor.
Bank.
Yeah, World Bank. Excuse me. Yeah, World Bank on this one. So this chart here is showing the inflation levels, and this goes back several decades. So we're back to the before the 80s, obviously. But if you look at this chart, and again, for those of you who are looking, you're going to notice we got a little spike here in the 2020s for sure. That's true. It's come down a little bit, right? So we're coming back down. But if you look, and I know that we are prisoners of the moment. We live in this moment. So right now is what's important. Two things with inflation. Number one, and something that no one ever talks about on either side, inflation increased because we pumped money into the economy. So when the pandemic happened, in order to keep things afloat, the government gave us stimulus checks. They introduced PPP loans that people obviously abused, but we pumped the system full of liquid cash. And anytime you pump an economic system full of currency, the system gets hot. So once it gets hot, because there's more money in circulation, and I know I'm giving some of you an economics lesson, I apologize. Some of you know this, and that's fine, but some of you don't. It causes the cost of items, of everyday items, to increase because there's more money in the system, which means the dollar, since that's our economic system, our dollar buys less because there's more of them in abundance, free floating. Okay. But that being said, we have brought inflation back down. We're almost back to the flatness that it's more or less been with some small peaks and valleys over the last, let's say, 30 years. But I want to show you something. It's very important to look at this chart. In the 1980s, okay, inflation was at an all-time high. So for some of you, who are old enough to be, and I'm not trying to date you guys, but old enough to be me and Wesley's parents, okay? Um, you lived in a time in which inflation was 13.54%, okay? Inflation remained above our highest level that we achieved in this most recent turn of events. So that's 2022. We were at 8.002%. Inflation remained above that 8.022% for 2.5 whole years. They didn't get down to a 6% until 1982. So I say that to say this: we are acting as though, and Donald Trump does a great job of painting this picture like inflation is so bad. And I'm not saying we're not hurting at times, or we haven't hurt in the last 3 years going to buy groceries or buy things at stores. Certainly we have. But when we compare it to the all time numbers, inflation, which is already coming down and is back to pre pandemic levels, was higher in the 80s. And many of you lived through that. Now, unfortunately, Wes and I weren't around in 1980, but we did pop up on the scene within the decade. So we got in there at the tail end. But that being said, I say that because sometimes we're prisoners of the moment and we think, oh my God, this is the worst it's ever been. That's not true. We had far worse. And just so we're clear, from 1980 until basically like 1988, Ronald Reagan was president. You had a Republican president, and this isn't to cast aspersions on Republicans in general, but just to illustrate a point. Inflation was high, and you had somebody that's allegedly economic guru. I mean, that's what Republicans tell us anyway. So I say that to say this: the story you're being told is being misrepresented, and when we can just say things and not back it up with facts, it makes it easier for us to manipulate people. One of the things that really just kind of floors me with this is it's a con man game.
Oh
So
yeah.
a con man is going to tell you any and everything. And I'll give you a different analysis because maybe some of you haven't dealt with con men. So it's like a used car salesman, right? He gonna tell you whatever he thinks he needs to tell you to get you to buy this car. You may ask very pointed questions. You may want to see some stuff. Nowadays, we got stuff like Carfax and stuff that we could request, but back then you didn't have as much of that, so you couldn't do all that. But nevertheless, a con man is going to tell you. A used car salesman is going to tell you anything he can to land a sale. Why? Because he lands a sale, he makes the money, he profits from it, right? But again, key note here: he profits from it. So he could sell you a lemon. He knows it's a lemon, but it just runs just enough for you to get it off the lot. And maybe if he lets you test drive it, maybe it's good for a 5 or 10 minutes drive. What he's not going to tell you is that once the engine gets hot and you go, 20 or 30 minutes letting that thing run, that thing is going to break down. And that's the con man game that's at play here. The economy is just another illustration of him playing the con man game. And just so we're clear, again, 2023, so I'm going back 1 year just to give you some numbers. In 2023, inflation got down to 4.116%, which means it was still lower than it was even through 3 years of a Ronald Reagan presidency. So I just to go to show that the story isn't being told the way that it needs to be represented. So Wes, I'll kind of pause here, and I've been talking for a little bit. Wes, what is your take here on the economic story that the former president is trying to spin to the people?
Well, you brought up an interesting point with the used cars. Unfortunately, we don't have lemon laws on presidents, so we kind of sort of, if he cons you, we kind of sort of get stuck there for a while. And I want everybody to think about this: if the economy was as bad as the former president said, why is he able to sell the product? Because, and this is wild that you have a former president selling products, but why is he able to sell the products that he's able to sell? He's selling you shoes. Well, he's selling people shoes. He's selling people Bibles. He's selling people watches. He's selling people coins with no value. He's selling people crypto. I'm sure he's selling something else that I forgot. But the man is out here selling products left and right. So if the economy was so bad, if the inflation was so terrible, why would he feel comfortable selling these things to the American people? Because that's who he's selling it to. He's not selling the Bible to people from another country when it has American related things in it. You know, I mean, you're just not doing that. So it's targeted to Americans. The shoes have the American flag on it. Uh, I have problems with that, but that's that they do. Um, so when you think about that, the economy can't be but so bad if he's able to make and sell products that also supposedly sell out with a future production date in mind. Like he's selling stuff that's not even made, but they're being sold out. I think that tells you that the economy is not but so bad. And I know that, you see crazy prices in the stores, but that is part of the greed of some folks in our economy. Those prices are like that because they know that you will still pay it. If the prices were, um, if they didn't think they could sell it and the stuff was sitting on the shelves, you see those prices change. But as you notice, when you go to the stores, more times than not, things are selling, products are moving. They're sold out of this, they're sold out of that, and that's without a shortage of the products. Or besides when you got some folks freak out and go buy toilet paper and stuff when they don't need to. But that's neither here nor there. Another conversation. But Brand, yeah, I think the economy is doing all right. It's not doing as well as it could, but it's getting there. That's what happens when you have to recover from, like you said, an economy that gets flooded with money with nothing to back it up. It's just a whole bunch of money being printed and putting out, given to people with no real value behind it. You get yourself in a financial situation. And I don't know if you're gonna talk about tariffs at any point in time, but when old boy put them tariffs on, you want to see an economy that's struggling. Wait till that happens. I can tell you that right now.
Oh no, that's a good segue. We don't have a slide for it, but I do have an illustration I want to use. So yeah, Wes, we can talk about it. So
Talk to me, Brent.
all right, so ladies and gentlemen, we talk about tariffs and we say, okay, well, tariffs are the way that the former president describes it. Tariffs are a way to allegedly uh, get us to make more stuff in America. Okay, which okay, the president, that former president, didn't do anything to bring back manufacturing jobs, but the current administration definitely did, and we got those hard numbers. But that's neither here nor there. I want to give you a math example of what a tariff might look like. So let's say say you run a t-shirt shop, right? So you make t-shirts, or you run a little small business, you make shirts and sell them, okay? And you can get shirts from China for $4 wholesale per shirt, okay? With his proposed plan, this is an example because the numbers obviously aren't fully meted out, but I'll just use in round numbers. If we imposed a flat $10 tariff, right? So we're putting a tariff on it, $10. That $4 shirt becomes $14. Now you say, okay, well, yeah, tariffs are going to make things higher. Yes, but let me explain to you why it's bad for you and not bad for Donald Trump and not necessarily bad for the American government, but it's going to be bad for you, the consumer. So when you pay the $14 to get the same one individual shirt, 10 of those dollars goes to the United States government. Okay, so you're still buying the shirt because for whatever reason, maybe you don't find somebody in America that makes them at a comparable price, or maybe their price is beyond that 14. Okay, so you're still buying them from overseas. You're going to still pay China the $4 because their price didn't change. They selling it what they sell it at, and the government can't change the price because the government doesn't have the authority to change that. But what they can do is put a tariff or basically a tax. And again, Republican Party and ladies and gentlemen, when you watch this, remind me if I'm incorrect. Republicans are supposed to be low taxes, right? I'm not confused on that, right? And the tariff works like a tax. So if you're adding tariffs, you are in effect taxing the people. No, Wesley, am I incorrect on that?
I mean, one plus one does tend to equal two.
Oh, okay. So you're taxing the people. Okay, now you're taxing the people on the front end, right? Okay. That still doesn't affect the other taxes you're going to pay. So okay, you got that. Okay. You paid sales tax on that. So that went somewhere, right? And then when if you have a business, obviously you're paying taxes. So you're giving them the tariff to get the item that you need to conduct your business. Okay. So they're getting it there. You paid sales tax, they got you there. You're going to pay taxes on your business because you're making a profit. So you're getting taxed. So again, a Republican president, and any other time in history, right? And if this works so well, now I want to put this to you guys too before we leave this topic. If tariffs work so well, Why did no other presidents in the intervening time apply tariffs? Why wouldn't George Bush have put tariffs on things? So why wouldn't so because you see that it's a almost a useless thing, unless you want to make funds for the government, which I'm not knocking that. If you make it funds for the government, that's fine. But you know, an easier way to make funds for the government, Wesley, make people pay their fair share of taxes, the regular taxes. We don't have to tax the items that come in the country. We can make people pay their fair share. And I'm not talking about regular American citizens like you and me and the folks
We
who
pay
probably
our
listen.
fair share.
We
Trust
pay
us.
our sometimes we pay more than our fair share.
Well, that's true
I'm
too.
I'm talking about people who are like the former president, who are billionaires and use weird loopholes in the tax code to shirk their economic responsibility to the country. So they benefit as these top 1 or 2 percenters, right? As billionaires, they benefit off of you and me because we're paying and shelling out taxes, which means we're paying for the defense of the country and we're paying for the roads. And we're paying. Meanwhile, they're paying as little as they possibly can because the tax code is broken. And the former president just wants to give tax cuts that affect mostly the rich. Trickle down economics has never and will never work because you're banking your economic system on the generosity. I got to say it this way, on the generosity of rich people.
Yeah.
So the only way it would work is if all the rich. Now I'm going to say this: if you were given a tax cut to a person like Mark Cuban helps out a lot of business and he spreads his wealth out. So that's a little different. But for most billionaires, they're not taking that money and putting it back into a place that can help other people. And so when you have folks that are greedy, it allows the rich to become richer while you and I and all of us regular Americans, middle class and working class, are struggling to make ends meet at times because they're getting richer off of us. And again, the former president, this is something that they don't talk. He does not understand because he has never had to live it, the existence of you and I. So, and I use this story. I talked to Wesley about this the other day. Now, Wesley and I had a laugh about it, but they don't. Donald Trump doesn't know what it is to go to the store and buy groceries, right? So, like you and I, we go in the store, and folks listening, you go in the store. If you see a pack of, let's say, chicken breasts, okay, let's say where you live, chicken breasts in that pack, it's a 5 pound pack. It costs $30. You and I may say, "Whoo, that's real high." So you may get a smaller pack. You may choose an alternative to that because you have a budget for your grocery shopping. The former president doesn't know that because he's never had to do that. He doesn't know what it is to have to create a budget because he doesn't do his own shopping. So when he tells you about this economic stuff, do remember he's only looking at it from his perch as a billionaire with failed businesses and bankruptcies to boot, but he's playing a game like Monopoly. You and I are trying to eke out a real life existence to take care and raise our families and to have a standard of living that is decent so that we feel comfortable in our lives. He cannot relate to you. Okay, yes, he talks like you because, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, but because he doesn't use big flowery words. He's not eloquent of speech. So he sounds a little bit like, Billy Joe that you know from down the road. That's fine. But Billy Joe down the road, he got the struggle you got because he Billy Joe down the road. Donald Trump lives in a place called Trump Tower. He bought a place called Mar-a-Lago from the Post family. Post family was a family that does the cereal from Marjorie Post. So he's buying entire complexes while you and I are just simply trying to put gas in a lawnmower, put food on the table, put clothes on the kids' back, and send them off to school. He does not, he cannot, and he will never understand the daily struggle you have as an American because he's never lived it. He hasn't had to. And at this point, because he's almost 80, unless something catastrophic happens, he never will. He cannot relate to you on an economic standpoint. Oh yes, he can rattle off numbers somebody tells him in his ear about inflation. He can try to tell you a little make believe story about people not buying apples in a store, but he does not, on the realest sense, understand what it is to go in a grocery store and have to say, okay, I'm buying generic over name brand this week because I got to make sure I have enough to cover the light bill and the phone bill and the car note and the car insurance. He different stratospheres. And so when you have someone that doesn't understand, they're just talking in generalities, right? He doesn't understand your pain points. So for him, he just knows it's something that's going to rile you up because he knows you're paying more. But that's because, unfortunately, somebody told him, not because he has experienced inflation himself.
Which is why he can only rattle off points that sometimes don't make sense because he can't connect the dots of the points because he doesn't know. Brand, I bet he's had more time on a golf course than he's had time inside of a grocery store. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Like he doesn't know anything about any of this stuff. It's wild. He can tell you more about a golf cart than he can tell you about a grocery cart. I can tell you that for sure.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And so so again, we have to remember, when you're going to elect a person, the idea is that we would want to elect people who see us where we are, and the idea is that this leader, right, is going to try to do to the best of their ability everything in their power to make our lives better. And if they, because leadership to me, and at my job, I am a sort of leader. I won't say I'm a boss. I don't like that term a lot, but I have a team that I lead. I am only as good as the least person on my team. And so it is my job to make sure all of my people have everything in my power. And if it's not in my power, I try to ask some people in some other places to get it, to make sure all of my people are taken care of, that they are not lacking for materials that some have. And some, my job is to make sure everyone has what they need. And if I succeed at that, and they know that I'm doing my best to give them the resources that they need, then and only then have I succeeded at my job. But if I am just talking in generalities and I'm not giving deliverables, I'm not talking about what are your needs, what do you need, what are you missing. Every time I have a one-on-one with my people, I know we're getting a little, but I ask them, I was like, okay, is there anything that you need that you don't have? Is there something that's a gap that we're not touching, that we're not aware of? Because I can try to fix that. That's what leaders do. You find where the problems are, and you meet the people where they are and address them, and then you check back in on them. You don't just fix the problem and run away, or throw a fix at them. You come back and say, hey, how is this fix working? And if the result is positive, hey, yeah, this is helping. Now I've succeeded as a leader. And that's how you lead. I know it seems kind of crazy. Donald Trump is a billionaire, and yes, he's got the Trump Corporation or whatever. But just because you have money and you have that doesn't mean you're a good leader. Um, and so I would say this is just another way to prove that he doesn't have the skills necessary to lead people, and he can't relate to you, and that's problematic.
Well, Brand, I mean, when you think about it, I think most of the businesses in which he's been over top of have failed in some form or fashion, which also should show that he probably shouldn't be leading uh, the American people because he seems to fail at everything that he does. And I don't want our country to fail. And it seems that that's what he's good at. He's good at failing. He's good at lying and making up stuff. He's the greatest golfer there ever was. He has a body that's better than all former presidents to ever exist. He is all these things that's better. He's more athletic than this person. He's the greatest. You can look at the man and tell that that's not true. So it's ridiculous. But he'll lie to you and tell you that. But Brent, let's get to immigration.
Okay, let's talk about immigration. So, the slide in front of you right now, this also here comes from Pew Data Research. So they did this for us. But this is showing three great ways of immigration to the United States over the last roughly, let's say, 200 years. Okay, so we had a wave from 1840 to 1889. So that's a period of about 49 years. We have a period of 1890 to 1919. So that was a period of about roughly 29 years. And then they have what we call the modern period, which is from 1965 to 2024. So that's today. When we look at the numbers, now the numbers are larger, but I did a deep dive here with these numbers. So I'm going to give you kind of a little breakout here, and then we're going to come back to this. So keep the slide up, Wes, but we'll come back to it. So
Yeah.
from 1840 to 1889, that 49-year window I told you about, 14.3 million immigrants came to the United States over a roughly 50-year period. All right. The population, so well, for per year, that was 0.29 million new citizens or new people migrating to the company, or to the country rather, per year. The population of the United States from 1840 to 1889 jumped from 17 million to 62.9 million. That's a 270% increase in the population. So basically, from about 20 years before the Civil War until just about we were into the 20th century, the population increased in the United States of America by 270%. Now, When we look at the next wave after that, so the period of 1890 to 1919, so this would have been, so if you look at these numbers, you're going to notice there's a gap during the World War II and the World War One, World War II, and then the conflict in Korea. Okay, so those three wars kind of grouped together. There's this gap here. So basically, from 1890 to 1919, so prior to World War One, or the U.S.'s real introduction into it, we had 18.2 million immigrants come into the country. That's an average of about zero point 0.6, so 600,000, right? So it's about 500,000 a year, a little more than that. In that same period of time, that 30-year window or 29 years, the population went from 62.9 million to 104.5 million. That's a 66.13 increase in the population number. Okay. All right. So population number was 270. Now the increase has come down. It's 66.13. Again, 29 years. So it's the 30-year window. All right. Let's look at the modern window. So 1965 to today, 72 million. Now, this is the largest period of time. So we're almost 6 decades. We're almost, if you look at it, we're 10 years longer than that 1840 to 1889 period. And we're almost 20, and we're basically double the 30-year window because we're almost 60 from that second wave. All right, so 72 million. So that's an average of about 1.22 million immigrants per year, new people coming. All right, from 1970 to 2020, because I want to give you even numbers. From 1970 to 2020, the US population grew by 63%. Now, again, that means that the growth is slowing down. Okay. And this is counting immigrants too, because immigrants are a part of the census. They do have to identify as whether or not they are US citizens, but they are part of the census. So if they participate, that number comes through. Our population grew in the last 60 years, so last 6 decades, from 204 million to 331 million. And now today we're closer to 335 in 2024. But the percentage of increase is actually on a downward slope. So the former president makes this argument about these people are coming and they are poisoning the blood of our country, and these inflammatory statements. But I want you to look, this is something that I want you to notice. I'm not making the numbers up. These are numbers you can check for yourself. If you look at the first 2 waves, so the northern, they call what they call the Northern European wave, that's in the 1840s to 1889, and the Southern or Eastern European wave in 1890 to 1919, you're going to notice predominantly the immigration patterns are people that are coming from Europe, from Canada, and then later on, further down the list, we start to get Latin America, South and East Asia, Africa, the Middle East, the Caribbean. Okay. When these other groups were a larger percentage of the immigrations coming in, oh, there was no problem. As a matter of fact, I learned this today. We changed the immigration laws in 1965. We altered it to make it easier. As a country, we decided post World War II, we wanted to make it easier for people to come to the United States because we wanted them to give us they're tired, they're poor, they're broken, because we believed in the American dream.
What happened to them words?
Now, I know. So when you look at it, the first 2 groups, they are, and again, I am, and just so you guys know, I'm not disgruntled with my white side. I am very much in touch with my father's family. Okay. So I'm not, this is not to bash on white folks, but what I am showing you here is your immigrants were coming from Europe. So we didn't have a problem when the immigrants looked like what we say is the predominant race or society running this country. It was all, fine, well, and good. The moment that the equation changes and these people have different skin tones and they speak, demonstratively some different languages, now it's a problem. They are invading us. They are polluting us. And of course, I don't believe this. This is utter foolishness. I will tell you, we talked about inflation earlier, and this ties back into that economic policy bit a little bit. The former president misaligns these folks that are immigrating here, coming to try to find a better life for themselves. I want you guys to know something. It's not something that maybe is right or fair, but it is something that is the truth. These people, most of these people, they're picking your produce. They're doing the jobs that you and I, as Americans, we would almost, because we want to be paid a certain wage, would look down our nose at. But they're willing to do it because they're just trying to make enough money to send back home to maybe get their family here, their kids, whatever the case may be. The reason your groceries, you talk about inflation, you talk about things being high at the grocery store. If the
Mm.
former president, gets reelected, and if they institute a change to the immigration policy where they're going to start deporting people, mass deportations, number one, I don't know the logistics of how that's going to work. And number two, there's something weird about turning the American military on the American soil against potentially their own citizens. Because how do you know they're undocumented immigrants? Are they going to stop and check people's documents? So there's a lot of nuance to that. But the biggest piece is this: these folks are going out there picking your produce for pennies on the dollar. So when you go buy your cabbage and it's you know 40 some cent a pound, okay, that's not so bad. A head of cabbage might cost you $2 or $3. It's not bad. It's bad enough, but it's not bad. When you remove them from the workforce, because we're sending them plumb out the country. Okay, who's picking your groceries? Okay, because now it's going to fall back on you and me, right? And again, I'm not saying it's fair because I do believe that there should be better wages for those folks. I'm not saying we need to continue to cheat and abuse those people. We need to everybody needs to be paid a living wage. We can do it. We're the world's richest country. So we can do that. That's a problem we can solve together. But again, the president doesn't believe that we can work together. He doesn't want to solve problems together. He just thinks he's an answer for a problem. He's the answer, not us as the American people working together, not us working on policy together. He is the answer. But nevertheless, your grocery bill is going to go up because those people that are paid pennies on the dollar will no longer be picking your produce. So either you're not going to have produce, or when us regular Americans have to go take that as a job, and we want all the health and benefits and things that go along with that, plus the living wage piece, and we want to earn 20 some dollars an hour so we can take care of our families. Pennies on the dollar go make all of your grocery needs, especially your produce and things, skyrocket. That's just one facet. A lot of these folks also work in hospitality. So these are the folks that when you go and travel, a lot of times they're cleaning your rooms where you stay. They are your servers in restaurants. They are an integral part of your society, and the life that you live now, the quality of life you live now is buoyed by immigrants. You don't like to think about it because, this the and ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say these things not because I believe them or they're personal, but these are the things that people say that are hateful. These Mexican people. Well, yeah, but if these Mexican people weren't doing what they were doing, if they weren't, construction is another area. If they weren't building your buildings, you would have a much smaller workforce because the conditions in which they work that are, acceptable to them, they will accept a whole lot more uncomfortable, unsafe work conditions than we would. And this is just full truth. I mean, we as a people, if we want to be honest with ourselves, we've gotten lazy. And so that's part of this thing. So again, we could go do the research for these numbers. We don't because we're lazy. So this is another symptom of a greater problem. But I say all that to say this: if you eliminate those immigrants, you will be ripping out a core construct of what currently builds your society. So no people to clean your. And again, I'm not limiting for folks listening. I'm not limiting Latino and Hispanic people. I know there's obviously Caucasian people that work in hospitality and in service and so on. So please don't take it as that. I don't mean it that way. But what I'm using it as an expression to show you how fundamentally your life will change if the former president is reelected and has his way with immigration. Go ahead and pull the next one up, Wes. Do want to show this as well. This is showing a percentage here with a bar graph. This is for 2022, showing the top 5 countries for birth of immigrants that now live in the United States. So at the time of this chart, and this is again from Pew Research Center, we had about 23% of immigrants in 2022. That was about 10.6 million people. They were born in Mexico. 2.8 million were born in India. 2.5 were born in China. 2 million were born in the Philippines. 1.4 from El Salvador. Okay. To give you percentages, Mexico makes up 23% of the overall number of immigrants that came in 2022. India is 6%. China's 5%. The Philippines 4%. El Salvador 3%. Now, these numbers are going to matter in just a few minutes because we're going to talk about some bias that goes in concert with those hate crimes. So we're going to touch this in a minute. But I do want to show you. So by region of birth, immigrants from Asia accounted for 28% of all immigrants. Okay. Latin America is 27%. That's excluding Mexico from that number, but including the Caribbean. So this is where your former president gets this, and it burns me up so bad to talk about the Haitian people. He didn't say the Haitian people. He just said immigrants, but he's talking about the Haitian people, and they would be from the Caribbean, amongst others. 10%, 9% from Central America, and then 9% from South America. Okay, Europe, Canada, and anything else that's in North America, 12%. And then sub-Saharan African was 5%. And so when we look at those numbers, we can see why there's this onus on attacking them. He tells these stories about crime, but I told you crime is decreasing, right? I told you that.
Hmm.
But so they're committing violent crimes, but crime for all people. Because the crime statistics don't count, are you a U.S. citizen or not? They just count, is it being reported? Does the police respond? Does it result in an arrest? Those are crime statistics. That's how they, crime is down. So even with the influx of people, crime is still decreasing. Those immigrants are not the criminals that the president makes them out to be. Now, could some of them be criminals? Yeah, but guess what, baby? We got criminals in the United States. Our own citizens are criminals,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
So we don't need immigrants to make us bad because we got enough bad actors on our own. And I will close just a little bit with this immigration piece with this, and I'll let Wesley have some commentary here. Immigrants today, this is a statistic I pulled from Pew Research data. This is a direct quote from their research. Immigrants today count for 14.3% of the US population today in 2024. And it's roughly a threefold increase from 4.7 in 1970. Now you say, oh my God, those numbers are so bad. I'm about to tell you something that's going to blow your mind. The immigrant share of the population today is the highest since 1910, but remains below the record of 14.8 in 1890. So even with the drumming up of an alleged crisis, which I would argue is more of a humanitarian crisis than it is a security crisis at the border, we are still below the highest rate of immigration this country has ever experienced in its history. So again, the former president is telling you immigration is a problem. These are criminals and bad people. But the numbers tell us immigration is not at its highest. Crime is down across the board. These people are not our enemies. And the other thing that's important to take from this, and this will lead us into our bias piece, when you tell people immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country, you give them a visual image of an enemy. Well, what do those people look like? Well, they're coming from south of the border, so they are Latino descent, right? So that's who he's targeting here, right? I'm just going to say it this because it's the only way I know how to say it for my Latino brothers and sisters listening. I know some of you have different shades. I know there's, black Latinos and white Latinos. I get that. I understand there's a multifaceted, rainbow of shades there. When a person who has hate in their heart has hate in their heart, they don't care that you're Cuban and you identify as Caucasian. They don't care that you're Puerto Rican and you're light skinned and you identify as Caucasian. They know that you are not white, and that sometimes is just enough for them to hate you. You may be an American citizen just like them, born here, raising a family here, a productive part of society. The former president is seeding people with hate because he believes hate sells. And if you can get people just mad enough, they'll start to distrust each other. And I will say this before we get to the bias, this is the most dangerous thing you could do because when you look outside of our country, the adversaries that exist, the Russias and the Chinas and the Irans, they are not afraid of the United States government because at times, no matter who's the president, sometimes the United States government is feckless. I'm just going to be honest. Sometimes we're busy trying to please everybody instead of taking a full stand. And that's true for Donald Trump. That's true to some extent for Joe Biden. I'm not making them, sometimes you have to make your line in the sand and stand on business. Okay. So that's a problem we got to fix. But the more important piece is unity within the United States. Because if you can divide 335 million people, our, our military is great. It is the greatest military in the history of the world. But the people are the fuel to the engine that makes America go. If you can divide them, then you will succeed because they will collapse from within. See, they can't get us from the outside. Our military complex is such that it would make it very difficult for them to get to us, right? We're, from a defensive standpoint, materials and personnel wise, we got a good defensive posture. But the enemy from within that the former president loves to spill out is not Kamala Harris. It's not the bureaucracy, because that's what he wants you to believe. And I'll even argue to some extent, it may not even be him. Now, he's crazy, don't get me wrong. And to me, he's still a threat to democracy and to this democratic republic. But the enemy from within is a line you use to turn people against each other. The moment we stop seeing each other as American citizens, as neighbors, as people that live in a community, we stop seeing each other as humans. And once you do that, you break the bonds that tie us together. And that more than anything is what the former president wants because he sells and peddles in hate.
You know, when you say that, it makes it interesting. It makes gives you a thought. And I want y'all to know, and we have not, and more than likely will not, mention in this anything about Project 2025. Everything has been facts outside of that. These are all things that we mentioned are things that the former president has said. And I want y'all to think about what he recently said when he said that, as Brand mentioned earlier, that he would use American forces to round up and deport people. The last guy that did rounding up of people, um, I think that they call that a Holocaust. I think that's the case. So I just want to ask: are we saying? Oh, well, I'm not saying, but are people saying that they're willing to support somebody that's talking about a potential American Holocaust? Because if he's gonna use our own forces to go around asking people, "Are you American? Do you have your papers?" and then he's rounding those people up, that sounds very Holocausty to me. I mean, what do you think?
I don't disagree. And here's one other thing we didn't talk about in this section, but I think it's worth noting. And the vice president has mentioned this several talking points at times. Let us not forget, and I have to go back to this because again, I'm trying to get folks to understand. Donald Trump does not care about you. Okay, if you're concerned about security at the border because of drugs and fentanyl and all the things, okay, all right, let's go with that for a moment.
Yeah,
Congress worked together. This
yeah,
Congress that cannot do anything together, they got together and they bipartisan put together a bill that they got the votes together in the House, which the House is notoriously bad at not working together. They got the votes together in the House to pass it. They already had it in the Senate because the bill started in the Senate. The president of the United States was ready to sign. So everybody was in agreement, except the 45th president of the United States, who told his cronies, and that's all I can call them is cronies because they have no backbone. They have no
yeah.
strength of character. And I'm going to get to that in my closing argument. They have no backbone or strength of character. The ones that do are retiring. They're leaving because they're sick of the foolishness. We'll get to that. But they would not sign a comprehensive bipartisan immigration bill to secure the border, to put resources in place because Donald Trump said it would hurt him in the election. The man is worried more about living at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and the trappings of power than he is about the border. If he could solve the border crisis, and he loves to say, why hasn't Kamala done it? She's a vice president of the United States. It's not her policy to run. It's Joe Biden's. And you want to, and she's not Joe Biden, but if you want to have a conversation with Joe, have that conversation with Joe. However, if you could do all these wonderful things, if you could make peace in Ukraine today, if he alleges, and this is something we don't know what the election will be. I have my hopes of what I hope happens, and so does Wesley, but we don't know. He said he's on record. And I'm telling you this now. Today is October the 19th, 2024. He said that if he becomes president-elect, he can end the war in Ukraine. If he could end the war in Ukraine, and other presidents and other diplomats that once they retire from public office, they work on the behalf of the government still, and go overseas and make peace agreements and negotiate. If he's such the negotiator, if peace is so important, why does he have to be president to make peace?
Exactly.
Because again, the peace isn't, but we're not fighting Russia. We might be helping Ukraine and giving them material support, but there are no American troops in Ukraine fighting on the ground. Ukraine and Russia are at war. So if he could work as a mediator between two parties, right? Why is he not doing that?
Right now.
Why? Right now. Because if he could create the peace that he promised he could create, well, golly gee whiz, I think a lot of people would vote for him, right? Even people who
Exactly.
are on the fence. If you could deliver, if you could deliver without the trappings of president, because again, you only need to be president to make peace if we're at war with these people. But that's not what's happening. He could say, hey, this is what we think. And listen, if you loved peace, if you love peace and stability in the world, right? And you were more about the people than you were about yourself, there's nothing that would stop you from calling the current president saying, hey, I know you and I don't see eye to eye, but let's work on this one together. Let's solve a problem together. And we have seen prior to this decade of hatred and vitriol, we have seen former presidents, Republican, Democrat alike, work together on common causes. From AIDS to poverty in Africa, they have addressed George Bush, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Jimmy Carter.
Can't forget Jimmy.
Can't forget Jimmy. They have worked even when they have no longer had the trappings of power because they believe in a world that should be better when they leave it than the way they found it. And if Donald Trump was this great deal-making peacemaker, why has he not delivered? Because again, it would be an amazing election tactic to say, hey, I got them to put down their arms. I got Russia to go back into their borders. And I got them to say, hey, this isn't worth it. We're killing too many people. He's such friends with Benjamin Netanyahu that and by the way, just so you guys know, because I know the Jewish people put out a thing the other day, they got an ad running for Donald. He got mad with Netanyahu because Netanyahu called Joe Biden. He was the first foreign leader to call Joe Biden and congratulate him on becoming the 46th president of the United States. And Donald got mad with him. If all it takes is for somebody to congratulate somebody else, for you to get mad and be petty, why do you think he is fit for office? Why? And he would be back with that same relationship with Bibi. Oh yeah, right now it's helping him because he could say, "Oh, I'm not the president. I'm not."
Mm-hmm.
But if all it takes is for you to congratulate another person, for him to just toss you on the trash heap, Donald likes to toss people on the trash heap. For a person that talks about loyalty, Donald wants loyalty to him, but that loyalty doesn't return back. It's not a two-way street. And when you have, to me, Wesley, correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's a one-way street where you reap all the benefits and I'm always left out in the cold, seems like to me you're a narcissist, no?
Or a parasite.
Or a parasite. We could go parasite, sucking the life from things. I could go with that. And not the helpful type of parasite either.
It's just a parasitic relationship. He's just taken from.
So again, if this was the case, this man would be doing this. Unfortunately, he is not. He told lies about the wall. Mexico's going to pay for the wall. I'm here to tell you, in 2024, Mexico ain't paying for no wall, and they told him as much. He has lied at every turn. And I know some of you are saying, well, politicians lie. Kamala Harris lie. I will agree with you. Politicians lie. Certainly they do. But there's a difference between a simple lie, like you misspeak. And I'll give you this, and you can look at this election cycle. When people are called out on their misspeaks, all right, you look at Tim Walz. Tim Walz the owner. He said, oh, okay, I misspoke. Kamala Harris, I misspoke, or whatever. You will never catch Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't have the humility. And this is another key piece of a leader, because it's easy to run roughshod over people. But the strength of character in a person to say, hey, you know what, I was wrong. To admit that you were wrong and to adjust your behavior because you realize you made a mistake. Donald Trump is the type of person, he doesn't make mistakes. Now, all of you are human. I'm human. We all know we make mistakes. Sometimes they're small ones, sometimes they're big ones. But guess what? We keep on living. We're going to keep making mistakes. We try to grow from them. Or hopefully we're the type of people that grow from them, learn from them, and adapt. But Donald Trump is not that. And you cannot have a leader who will not adapt to change. You cannot have a leader who is not able to own the things that he or she should be owning in themselves and as outwardly to whoever they're leading, whether it's a country, a team of people at a job, whatever the case may be, on the field or on the court. A leader is supposed to be accountable not only to themselves but to the folks around them, and they have to own sometimes that, hey, I messed up. Donald Trump does not have that in him.
He sure doesn't, and he's not gonna get it in him. He's too far in his age. He's stuck in his ways, and as they say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I think that's where we are with old boy. But Brent, let's get to bias and close on up out of here.
Sure. So with bias, this ties back to our hate crime statistics. So this is showing the inherent bias that is subjected with these hate crimes. So I've got some more information here on the screen in front of you. You're going to see some numbers. So race is the largest race, ethnicity, and ancestry. So what color are you? What kind of people did you come from? And where did them people eventually come from? Okay, is the largest percentage of the bias categories. Following that is religion. So okay, all right, if it's not the way you look and the way you speak and the people you come from, it is the God that you pray to. And if it's not the God that you pray to, it is who do you choose to love, your sexual orientation. Okay, so these are the three biggest topics. Now I want to give you some numbers to help you understand. So the bias types, the total number of these hate crimes over this period that we're looking at is 82,753. Of that number, the highest category is anti Black or African Americans being targeted. They make up 14,615 of that number, followed very closely. I say very closely, but the next following category are anti Jewish things. So for my Jewish brothers and sisters, you are targets too. And again, hate crime has increased since 2020. They make up 5,424 of these incidents. Following that is anti gay, and this is attached to the gentlemen who are gay, choose a gay lifestyle. 4,376 of those. Coming in the fifth category, ironically enough, so we're going to be fair, is anti-white sentiment, 4,331, and the last to round out the top here of our numbers here, the top five, anti-Hispanic or Latino with 3,179 reported incidents during this time period. Now, I give you these numbers to tell you this: it's not just about the black, although obviously it's a larger portion of that. But what are we doing? We are splitting people up. We're
Mm-hmm.
splitting up different groups. We're attacking the black people. We're attacking the Jewish people. We're attacking the gay people. We're attacking the white people. We're attacking Latino people. We're attacking Asian people. Why? Because it's all a form of division. We are splitting people up. We want people to feel afraid because fear sells, because we're angry and we want to be. But that's not the reality we live in. Everything that we have done as a country, every success that we have had in the last century has been because of collaborative work. And really, if you think about it, though some of it was through forced servitude, every success from the very beginning of this country until this very moment in time has been built by a coalition of people. Now, sometimes those people didn't come willingly, but it still took all of them, the white people, the forced servitude of slaves, so those are African people. It took all of us, the Native Americans that were here and decided to participate in society, that ran off their land and decided to be a part, the folks that came, the immigrants that came from four corners of the earth to come. It took all of us to accomplish all of the things that we have to make this country what it is. And we have gotten so close to the promise of the dream that all men and all women are created equal, that we are endowed by our creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these is life. Abortion attacks that, though, done because you can't, your life at risk. We can't operate on you, man, because it's liberty. So that's the freedom to choose what you want to do with your life, with your body, freedom to choose who you love, freedom to choose where you live and what you do for a job, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the freedom to do the things you enjoy, to be happy and content with your activities, with your family and the things you do. We're splitting people up because division is what he peddles in. I'm going to give you
Mm-hmm.
a couple more statistics that are not in this chart, but break down these numbers better. So by category, so this is the offense type. The largest offense type is intimidation. These people are intimidating their victims. The second one is destruction and damage, vandalism of property. And then finally, after that, is simple assault. If you take those three and add them together, you roughly get about half of your bias categories here being victims of intimidation, destruction of property, assault. Those right there make up 40,000 plus of these incidents. So again, but the biggest one is intimidation. So sometimes we're not even necessarily physically harming a person. We're intimidating them. We're threatening them. We're getting out of our car and talking big and bold with our chest. Why? Because some I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. The more I talk about it, the more inflamed I get because some orange Cheeto dust encrusted man told you that you should hate these people. And you, because you are feeling some type of way, maybe because you're down on your luck, maybe because you feel down and out, maybe because no one has sat down and you haven't had a nice conversation with these people to understand that they're humans just like you, that they say have the same hopes and dreams and aspirations. Sure, they come from a different background, but all of us want a safe place to raise our family. All of us want clean water. There's simple things that we want. These are the ties that bind us together. But the former president wants you to believe that they're your enemy. And so if he can incite that piece of you, and it's almost like, and I hate to say it this way, it's almost like because Donald's not this smart, but it's almost like he's pulling the ancestral strings, these strings that have, for some of you, laid dormant for decades because you've tried to live better than our predecessors. We tried not to have these built in biases and these hates. And it's like he grabs something ancient, something down inside of us, because we do know, and Wes and I talked about this, that trauma and certain characteristics are passed down generation to generation. Sometimes because the person chooses to be better, those things can be controlled and repressed and held in check. But if a person were to just start letting those barriers down, that old nature starts to climb back up. For my Christian people, I'll pivot on you and say that old sinful thing that was always in you, that old generational curse that's been handed down from generation to generation, that thing starts to get life breathed into it. And now we got a different kind of problem because now we're hating each other simply because we're different. And that is a poignant way to divide people. And so he's pulling on these ancient strings, hoping that anger and that, because it's almost like a lynch mob that you just get mad enough. Look at the scenes of Charlottesville. Look at the scenes of the people attacking the Capitol building.
Mm-hmm.
If you take away black people being free and working as police and doing different things at these places, right? You wouldn't know what time period it is. You don't know if it's 1820 or if it's 2020. I mean, just do the visual inspection for yourself. So again, it is an attempt to get us to be at each other. And just a couple quick things, and then I'll close it out. Where these actions happen, so the location, the largest percentage of these happen either at the residence or home of the victim.
Yep.
So these are people coming to the people's house and acting a fool, or on the road, the highway, the alley, the street, the sidewalk. These are your two biggest ones. Other areas would be something like schools, parking lots. But when I say highway, I mean like on the street. These are people. So you could be jogging down the sidewalk. Somebody decides that you don't belong in a neighborhood that you might live in and own a house in.
Yep.
But because somebody has riled them up, now they're questioning you. Now, listen, I'm not saying like if you see somebody doing something shady, somebody's over in a bush, doing something shady or whatever. I'm not saying like don't keep your head on the swivel and look. Sure, look. Be cognizant. Something happens, you can report to the police. Don't confront the people. That's not your job. But also be cognizant of where you are. And also, you don't know the whole situation. So you observe, you notate what you're seeing. But everything is not an action that requires us to turn into Karens. We don't need to report everything. And we certainly don't need to be accosting people to their face. That's most important. But I do also want to share these last two bits with you. The offender race. So the largest offending group race, there's no surprise here. And again, I don't mean this to sound as a bash against white people. And I'm gonna, when I close this bias statement, I'm gonna say something about the Caucasian community in just a moment. But I want to tell you, the biggest group is white people. So of the 82,000 reports, 21,596 were of the offender race. So these are the people committing the crimes. They were white. 8,319 were black. They have 7,507 that were of unknown, so that's kind of ambiguous. Maybe they didn't capture the data. And then 580 that, 2,736 that are multiple, so they're a little mix of things. So they might be more in line with me. I'm two things, although I'm the top two categories, of course. But that just shows the biggest problem is with the white community, followed by a distant second, African American. But again, it's a form of division. They're pitting us against each other. We can be better if we choose to be better. Mm-hmm. Finally, I'll close with this. Victim type. Overwhelmingly, victim types of hate crimes are individuals. Of the 82,753 I told you about, nearly 50,000, the actual number is 49,978. So 50,000. So if you think about it, if we could do simple math problems, if we got 8 apples on the table, 5 of these apples are against the individual. This means that somebody attacked an individual person. They didn't attack a business. Business is the second group. That's 3,725. Not the government. The government's got some numbers though. 2,313. Religious organization comes in at fifth at 1,195. So it's your churches, your synagogues, your mosques. The biggest victim is the individual. Well, why would it be the individual? Because you can fray the bonds that tie us together. Or you can attack a religious institution, and as a Christian, you could feel some type of way. But there's different types of Christianity, right? So there's different denominations and stuff. So that's a little more wide open. Government, oh, that's the government, that's the man. So that's a little different, right? But individually, we can attack the fabric of community, the fabric of our people. And so that is why you see it big there. Because oftentimes these hate crimes, a lot of times they don't even know the people. It's just a happenstance and they get riled up. Something inside them just goes ham. And so that is why it's important for us to look at that. Now, all these numbers I just read out and the bias categories listed on the screen and the previous hate crime data statistics comes from the FBI Crime Data Explorer. You can go to the website. It's a government maintained website and you can run these numbers for yourself. You can see, I'm not making them up. You can filter by categories, and so you can do by categories, by number, or what they say value. And so, but you can actually see these numbers I'm reporting to you. So I say all that to say this. It is a fundamental truth that Donald Trump is attacking the fabric that ties us together. There can be no question or no qualms about it. If he was for our border security, he would have said, I support this. And even though I don't normally agree with Democrats, I will stand with them on this instance. Yep. He did not. He won't. And he still won't. Okay. Mm-hmm. If he could make peace with adversaries that are not our adversaries directly, but are foreign adversaries and bring peace to Europe and maybe bring peace to the Middle East, he would have done it because it would have made him look good in an election year. But yep. He cannot, just like he couldn't beat the justice system when they gave him a jury of his peers. And they voted to convict him on all 34 counts. Now, you might say, oh, they weaponized. I keep hearing the weaponization of the Justice Department. No, they didn't weaponize the Justice Department, but you know who's promising to do it? Donald J. Trump.
Yep.
And so here's the thing. I have participated in a jury trial. I've been on a jury in a trial, okay? They give you clear instructions, before and jury selection happens. This is another thing they don't talk about. We don't do enough talking to really understand the thing. He was judged by a jury of his peers. They do jury selection, which means Donald Trump's lawyers had a chance to strike down jurors.
He was there too.
And he was there in person. The jury they got was agreed upon by both the prosecution, which represents the government, and the defense, which represented the former president of the United States. And they agreed on the 12 people that sat in that box plus the alternatives. Okay? So the former president was judged by a jury of his peers and found by the legal letter law, because the judge will tell you, and I've done small stuff. I haven't done anything as grand as this, obviously. But the instructions that the judge gives you before we're sent back to the deliberating room is that you have to read the law as it is. He said, if you have questions about a piece of that law that you're reading for these counts, you can write it on a piece of paper. We'll come in, we'll explain it to you, all of that. But you have to use the law as it's currently written as your only measuring stick to whether or not there is reasonable doubt, okay, that this person committed these crimes, okay? So even if the Justice Department is weaponized, the jury is not, and the judge didn't pass the sentence. The prosecution didn't go in there and render guilty verdicts. If that's the case, then they would have just done it. We wouldn't have had to have a trial. The people heard the evidence presented to them. They deliberated as 12 people in that room, and they decided that the president committed all 34 acts. That's not weaponization. That's a jury of his peers that he and his legal team had a chance to strike people down. And the people they wanted, they kept, and they still lost.
I want to talk about weaponization. Talk about him stacking that Supreme Court.
That's a whole other bag of things. Oh, don't worry. Mitch McConnell is going to get his in my closing remarks. But I just want to just kind of illustrate that because Wesley brought it up as a point. This Donald Trump cannot take accountability for anything. And he is looking for the office of president not to help you and me, but to protect himself.
Yeah.
He's using the government to weaponize the government to go after his political enemies.
what he said.
He is turning the military potentially on what he perceives to be illegal immigrants. So, and just think about this for just a moment before we close. If the military is busy rounding up people to deport them, what happens if we have a real emergency where a and it just dawned on me, what happens if a foreign adversary attacks us and our military is tied up and pulling people out of houses?
Yeah.
What happens to the safety and the security of this nation when our military is busy rounding up folks like cattle and
Hey,
shipping them somewhere? Hmm? For all of the money that you talk about, Donald's going to make you individually as individual citizens, all of these things come at a cost. National security is at risk. We know the deficit is still running up. You think that sending the military to round up people is going to be cheap or free? Absolutely not. It's going to cost money.
yep.
Well, guess who pays for the military? Not Donald J. Trump, because he don't pay taxes. Remember, he still trying to figure out the taxes from 10, 12 years ago. Donald Trump don't pay taxes. But you know who does? You and me and all of us regular folks just trying to eke by an existence. And so now our tax dollars are going to go to do hateful, ornery, unnecessary things. And the one thing I haven't mentioned in all this, when they deport some of these people, we didn't talk about it, but let's just remember, even if you are an illegal immigrant, if you start having kids here, guess what? Your children are U.S. citizens.
Yep.
So mom and dad may be sent across the border. And now these kids, they have to go in the system if they don't have a relative that is an American citizen that can take them in. It is mind boggling. It is heartless. And for people who proclaim that they are, and also, let's also talk about this Republicans. You are for well, for many, many years, for decades, you were for smaller government. Military rounding up people, that seems like big government to me. The military, paying the military to round up people sounds like big government to me. Putting all of these kids that we're going to turn into foster children because we are hateful and ornery sounds like bigger government to me. Telling women that they don't have authority over their bodies sounds like bigger government to me. So for all this bravado that we've been told about the Republican Party, and I'm not here to rail against decent Republicans, because decent Republicans believe in the American dream. They know that we are a nation of immigrants. They counterbalance some of the more liberal policies so that we land somewhere close to the center, because most Americans are in the center. We might lean one way or another to some instances, but most of us are in the center. We think we should be safe. Safety requires a big military. Well, the Republicans believe that. The Republicans also used to believe in alliances. Donald Trump don't believe in that, because, and I'll just say this because it's right here, and then I'm gonna close. I'm gonna get to my closing argument. Donald Trump don't believe in allies because Donald Trump don't have friends.
I agree.
When you don't have, and listen, I know people claim to be his friend. I'm not saying that, but when you have a true friend, you're going to be there for your friend. All of us hopefully have some friends. We may not have many, but that's okay. We have some have smaller circles, some have bigger. But a true friend, you're there for, and you're going to support. You'll give them guidance when they need it. Hopefully, they'll give you guidance when you need it. But you're there to support them. Well, you don't believe in alliances if you don't have friends. Now, some of you are going to say, "Bah, he wants them to pay their fair share." But listen, that's true. But listen, if Wesley and I went out to eat, and for some reason I didn't have it, I would try not to put Wesley in a position to do it. But I know if I didn't have it, and let's say Wesley would spot me. Hey man, I got you. Don't worry about it. And same thing. If Wes went with me, I invite him somewhere he ain't got. Bro, don't worry about it. You with me, I got you. Ain't no problem. Because that's what friends do. We might be paying today, but there may come a point where they pay. But it doesn't matter because we're friends. And so money is nothing because our relationship is more important than the almighty dollar. But again, Donald doesn't have friends. So he doesn't understand. His family dynamics are not like normal families. And I'm not casting aspersions on his other people. Those people seem to like each other. Like his children, they like each other to some extent. But they have a weird relationship with their father. And so there's this disconnect, where he's not really involved. So a man that's not involved at home, a man that lies and denigrates women, that says he can grab them by their genitals, and that he's a protector of women, but he's grabbing them by their genitals, and immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country, and all of this stuff. And I'm going to pick on my religion again, we as Christians are like, oh, but he's against abortion, I can vote for that. How are you turning a blind eye to all of the other egregious actions? And listen, I'm not saying Kamala Harris is perfect. I'm not saying that. But what I will say is this, and I truly believe this in the bottom of my heart. If you as a Christian and as a Republican believe that Republicans are good, real Republicans, not Donald Trump, real conservative individuals, your best hope at electing a real conservative, is to vote for Kamala now so that decent Republicans have a shot to get in the White House post 2028. Because I'm here to tell you now, Donald Trump has already put us Christians on notice that if we vote this time, we won't have to vote anymore. He is attacking now after he split the bonds that tie us together, he is attacking the very foundations of the Democratic Republic. He is a clear, and I don't listen, I'm not advocating political violence. Donald Trump does not need to be beat with a bullet. He does not need to have hands laid on him. The only hands you need to lay is on that ballot in the ballot box. The only gun you need to shoot is when you put that paper in your Scantron box to scan your vote. We have a chance to choose a different path forward. One path takes us on continuing the American experiment. The other leads to destruction. And he's promised, and here's the crazy part, the destruction he's telling you is the destruction he brings. I showed you the numbers. It's not the destruction that exists. It's the destruction he wants to bring. So that's it with the bias. Wes, I got closing arguments, but I'll open the door for you for anything before I round us out of here.
I'll let you round us out because I said my piece on old boy. He's yeah, he's him. He 100% is himself, and he has told people what to do, or what he's going to do, without a plan, without a written plan that somebody else wrote that is tied to him. He's told you his own plan. The man went on TV the other day and talked about getting rid of the Department of Education, and then when asked about what about the liberal states that teach about slavery and things, oh, well, I won't fund them. We won't send them money. So if people want to teach the truth, he wants to change the educational system so that some things don't get taught. And if you want to do that, I'm not funding you. That's wild to me.
Yes.
So, but Brent, I'll let you close us out.
Okay.
Go ahead, brother.
All right. So I'm going to start with a quote. Now, this is the last piece. The president is the commander in chief. That's something we've known since we've known about the way our government works. I'm going to give you this comes from Bob Woodward in his book War. This is a quote from General Milley, who was appointed by Donald Trump himself to chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and served for both Donald Trump and for President Joe Biden. This is his direct quote. "We have to stop him," General Milley said. You got to stop him. And by you, he meant the press broadly. "He is the most dangerous person ever. I had suspicions when I talked to you," referring to Bob Woodward, "about his mental decline and so forth. But I now realize he is a total fascist. He is the most dangerous person to this country." Then General Milley's eyes darted around the room filled with 200 guests. So he said this line in front of 200 people, in front of journalists. 200 guests of the Cohen Group, a global business consulting firm that is headed by the former Defense Secretary William Cohen. Cohen and former Defense Secretary James Mattis, also another former general, spoke at the reception. Milley said, doubled down again, "A fascist to the core," he repeated to me. I want to tell you something. Wes mentioned earlier about rounding people up and sounding like the Holocaust. We talked about the revisionist history attack that he is attempting to lay out. When you rewrite history, you can create your own story, your own narrative, and the hope is that people believe it. The former president just this week described January 6th as a day of love. In all the ways that matter, this man, he has told you that he likes some of Adolf Hitler's things. The man is telling you point blank who he is. I'm going to close with this. Bullies are cowards. I'm now going to talk to the cowards in the Republican Party a minute. Ted Cruz. This man said your father helped assassinate John F. Kennedy, and now you lick his boot heels. Mitch McConnell. Your wife resigned her role in the administration after the actions, or inaction rather, of the president on January 6th. Donald Trump, as recently as last year, resorted to racist name calling towards her. And yet you still trotted out to the Republican National Convention to bow and kiss the ring. Let me give you the quote. This comes from NBC, but let me give you the quote. This is, and for my Asian population listening, I don't mean these are Donald Trump's words, not mine. Does Coco Chow have anything to do with Joe Biden's classified documents being sent and stored in Chinatown? Trump wrote. Her husband, the old broken crow, is very close to Biden, the Democrats, and of course, China. In a statement shared with NBC News condemning Trump's attacks, first reported by Politico, uh, and for those that don't know, this is Elaine Chao. So this is a former secretary. She was actually in two administrations. She worked for George W. Bush, and she worked for Donald Trump. Chao, who immigrated to the United States, also an immigrant from Taiwan as a child, spoke out about the racism Asian Americans have faced. When I was young, some people deliberately misspelled or mispronounced my name. Asian Americans have worked hard to change that experience for the next generation. Chao said that he being Donald Trump, doesn't seem to understand that, which says a whole lot more about him than it will ever say about Asian Americans. Now I'm back to talking trash about Mitch. I have nothing to say about Elaine. That lady, as far as I'm concerned, is all right. She's okay. But her husband, on the other hand, McConnell's only real disavowing of Trump was written in the words of a book, where Donald would actually need a person to actually tell him about the quote or physically pick up the book, which we know he's not going to do, and read it. So I'll save you all a trip, okay? This is the best that this man had for a man who insulted his wife. His quote was that Donald is, quote, stupid and ill-tempered. That's the most fiery language he could come up with for a man who made a racist remark about his wife. Mitch McConnell failed his leadership test in the second impeachment of Donald Trump, and his failures continue to this very day. Here's the best part. They are looking for his replacement, Mitch McConnell, that is, no doubt, I'm sure, somebody even more feckless and willing to bend the knee to Donald Trump. They have set this man up, that man being Donald Trump, like he's a king. Now listen, Republicans are worried about where transgender folk use the bathroom or what sports they participate in, but they don't have the balls to stand up to a man who directly attacks their family. Ladies, please pardon my next expression. I don't mean it this way. I know y'all are strong and it's strong, but for this one applies to them. In every way that matters, these men are nothing but pussies. Nothing but. They are cowards, too afraid to stand up for their families, too afraid to stand up for themselves, and too afraid to stand up for the people of the United States of America. When you care more about culture wars than you do about people, when you worry more about power than you do about doing the right thing, and these same cowards, like sheep, would lead this country to the brink. If we do not get out and vote, they lack the moral fiber to protect us from their beloved president. Say what you will about Joe Biden stepping out of the race, but when Democrats thought that maybe he wasn't the best path forward, they came out, they were very vocal, and some of them even at peril to their own re-election campaigns. And this is meant as no slight to the president, because I mean, it takes a real man to realize I have to turn loose the power. Joe Biden on his own, just from some comments from his own party, willing to give up the power. Donald Trump losing a straightforward election, sent people to the Capitol building. Dichotomy of two presidents. But as much as I talked about this, it is a comparison of what each group does when confronting their leader and trying to hold them accountable. Ladies and gentlemen, the power is not in the hands of Donald Trump. The power is not in the hands of Kamala Harris. The power is not in the hands of Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. The power is in our hands together, we the people. You got a choice to make in 16 days. I hope for the sake of your family and my family and all of the people to come after us that we make the right choice. So if it isn't clear by now, just so we're all clear, and we won't do this on the main podcast, but I will do it here. I am voting for Kamala Harris. Because I cannot. There is not a world that exists where Donald Trump aligns with what American values are to me. And my hope is, no matter what happens with her presidency, that it's a continuance of the perfecting of our union. We are only as strong as our weakest link, and we go together. If you let this man pull us apart, You talk about he likes to say we won't have a country. If you reelect him, if you let him continue to divide us, if we cannot get him to go politically into that good night, we won't have a country, we won't have a people. And we will do what every other great empire has done since the dawn of time. We will fade into the dust and into the history books. The choice, America, is yours.
And with that said, this has been the Experts About Nothing podcast, our election voting special. And we thank y'all for joining us today. Please give us your thoughts in the comments. We thank y'all for joining us today.
Vote.
Please vote. Like your life depends on it because it does. And we out.